This is a story about a land that is almost unknown beyond its own borders, about a space so vast and so empty that a person standing in the middle of it loses all sense of their own scale, about a place that never made it into the world's natural history textbooks alongside the Serengeti and the Amazon, yet holds within itself what has already been lost elsewhere on the planet. This is a story about silence that is older than all names, and about a horizon that has no end. What is at stake here is not a species, not a nature reserve, not an isolated patch of land. What is at stake is an entire steppe, the last one in the world still functioning at its historical scale. A steppe across which thousands of antelopes once moved, thousands of eagles, and an invisible web of ground squirrels keeping everything in balance. A steppe where you can still see flamingos standing on salt lakes in the middle of the plain, almost Western Siberia, not Africa. A steppe over which migration routes of several continents pass, and on which it depends whether the crane reaches India and the red-breasted goose reaches the Caspian. Here the snow leopard walks among rocks above 3,000 meters. Here the saiga antelope gives birth in the hungry steppe, precisely because it is least visible to predators here. Here mountains lift water into the sky and give it to rivers that sustain several countries. And all of this rests on a delicate balance between the vastness of the space and what humans are capable of doing to nature over just a few decades. The story of the Aral Sea showed how short those few decades can be. And what is worth preserving to you? A place you have seen, or a place that exists whether you have seen it or not? What matters more, discovering something new or protecting what has not yet been lost? And what will happen if someday it turns out that places like this no longer exist anywhere on the planet? That is what the next 90 minutes are about. The Kazakh steppe in spring is not a gradual awakening, it is a blow. In April, it suddenly erupts with color so sharply that what happens seems almost unbelievable. Wild tulips, not garden-grown, not cultivated, but real steppe tulips, cover the ground in such dense carpets that walking without stepping on a single flower becomes practically impossible. Red, yellow, white, sometimes almost black. Right here in the Kazakh steppes, one of the main centers of origin for the tulip as a species is found. All garden tulips in the world are direct descendants of these wild steppe flowers, not metaphorically, but literally. They bloom for a few weeks, exactly as long as there is moisture in the soil from the winter snows. Then the heat closes the season, the tulips retreat underground until the next April, and the steppe turns green again, then gold, then scorched. From the air, the steppe looks endless in uniform, until you start looking more carefully. In fact, it is not a flat plain but a system of gentle hills, depressions, salt flats, lakes, and river valleys, and each type of terrain has its own life. In the depressions where moisture collects, the grass is different, the birds are different, the insects are different. On the salt flats, there is special vegetation adapted to soil with high salt content. Near the lakes, reed beds, sedges, ducks, herons. The steppe only seems monotonous from a distance. Up close, it is a very diverse place. The Great Steppe, as the nomads called it, as historians call it, stretches from Hungary to Mongolia. Kazakhstan occupies its central and most extensive part, and this is one of the largest remaining steppe massifs on the planet. Most of the world's steppes have already been plowed, in North America, Argentina, Europe. The Kazakh steppe is one of the last places where the steppe ecosystem still functions at its historical scale. Not perfectly, not without losses, but it functions. The saiga antelope still lives here. The steppe eagle still lives here. The great bustard still lives here. All of this has disappeared, or nearly disappeared, everywhere the steppe has been turned to farmland. In the Dace 18, the saiga antelope population collapsed catastrophically. Poaching for their horns destroyed roughly 1,000,000% of the animals. From over 1,000,000 individuals, only a few tens of thousands remained. It seemed like the end. But then came protection, then slow recovery, and today Kazakhstan again has around 1 million saiga antelopes, one of the largest wild antelope populations in the world. Their migrations across the steppe, when thousands of animals move in a single direction, are a spectacle that until very recently seemed lost forever. The saiga antelope is an ancient ungulate with a large, soft nose overhanging its upper lip, one of the symbols of Kazakhstan and one of the most extraordinary survival stories in nature. It runs fast, up to 80 kilometers per hour. Its nose is not an evolutionary quirk, but a precise engineering solution for life in an extreme climate. In winter, it warms the inhaled air. In summer, it cools and moistens it. In a steppe where winters reach -30 and bring dust storms, and summers reach +40 with dry winds, this is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Females give birth in May, when the steppe is still green, almost always to twins. The fawns are on their feet within minutes, and within a few days are already running with the herd. The steppe allows no time for a slow childhood. The steppe eagle in Kazakhstan is one of the most numerous large avian predators of the steppe zone in the world. It hunts ground squirrels, those same animals that stand upright at their burrow entrances and whistle at the approach of danger. The ground squirrel in the steppe is what the lemming is in the tundra, a regulator and food base for everything around it. Where there are many ground squirrels, there are many eagles, many foxes, many steppe polecats. The ground squirrel is the pulse of the steppe. It disappears where the steppe has been plowed or overgrazed by livestock, and everything that depends on it disappears along with it. The great bustard, the heaviest flying bird in the world, weighing up to 20 kilograms, still exists in the Kazakh steppe. In small numbers, but it does. It moves through tall grass slowly and majestically, spots danger from several kilometers away, and withdraws long before any threat can come close. The takeoff of a great bustard is a spectacle in itself. A long run-up, a heavy ascent, but once airborne it flies powerfully and far. It winters in Iran and Pakistan, nests in Kazakhstan. Its nest is simply flattened grass in a field, no structure, just earth and sky. The steppe is held together by invisible threads. One of them leads to where thousands of pink birds live in the Kazakh desert. The lakes of northern Kazakhstan, Tengiz and Kurgalzhyn, are places most people have never heard of, yet they have global significance for migratory birds. The Kurgalzhyn Nature Reserve, a UNESCO site, is the northernmost nesting ground for the greater flamingo in the world. Flamingos in the steppe. Not Africa, not Spain, Kazakhstan, almost Western Siberia, thousands of pink birds in shallow water of a salt lake amid a boundless plain. This is one of the most surreal and beautiful natural images that exist on Earth. The greater flamingo arrives here in May and nests on islands of silt and salt. In autumn, it flies to Iran and Turkey. At Lake Tengiz, a vast salt lake at the center of the steppe, flamingos gather in numbers of up to 10 birds simultaneously, making this one of the largest flamingo colonies in Central Asia. The lake is so salty that almost nothing lives in it except brine shrimp. But it is precisely those shrimp that the flamingo feeds on, filtering water through its curved bill. The pink color of flamingos comes from pigments in the brine shrimp. Without them, the bird would be white. Color is written into its feathers as diet. Pelicans, swans, cranes, ducks in numbers that are hard to imagine. These are the Kazakh steppe lakes during migration periods. They lie at the intersection of several migration routes from Siberia southward. In spring and autumn, millions of birds pass through these lakes, and on peak days the density of birds on the water is such that the water itself is barely visible. This is not an exaggeration. It has been documented in aerial photography. The steppe ends where the mountains begin, and there, an entirely different story. The story of an animal almost never seen. The Kazakh Altai in the east of the country is a continuation of the same mountain massif known from its Russian part. but looks somewhat different here. The forests are more open, the steppe climbs higher up the slopes, the transitions between zones are sharper. At an altitude of 2,000 meters, meadows with wildflowers so dense that walking through them is like walking on a soft carpet. Here graze argali, mountain sheep with enormous curled horns. Males use those horns in tournament battles, crashing heads together with such force that the sound carries several kilometers. After the fight, both often stand swaying, knocked down, but not knocked out. The snow leopard in the Kazakh portion of the Tianshan and Altai is a rare and nearly invisible animal. Several hundred individuals live in Kazakhstan above 20 meters, hunt alone, hold enormous territories, and have the ability to be completely invisible against gray rocks. Every photo from a camera trap is an event. Its long tail, almost as long as its body, serves as a balance during leaps across rocky terrain. When a snow leopard clears a 5-meter gap, the tail works as a rudder. Without it, the jump would be impossible. The Tianshan, the Heavenly Mountains, rises in southeastern Kazakhstan to 70 meters. Khan Tengri, one of the most beautiful peaks in Central Asia, stands directly on the border of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and China. Its profile is a perfect pyramid of reddish marble, visible for hundreds of kilometers on a clear day. The glaciers of the Tianshan feed rivers in several countries: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. Everyone drinks water that originates here, in the snows and glaciers at 5,000 to 6,000 meters of altitude. This is the water tower of Central Asia, and it is slowly melting. The South Inilchek Glacier, one of the largest in Central Asia, more than 12 kilometers long, is blue not because that is how young ice looks, but because ancient dense ice absorbs the red end of the spectrum and reflects the blue. The older and denser the ice, the brighter the blue. At the foot of the glacier lies a glacial lake that appears and disappears every few years. It forms from meltwater, breaks through an ice dam, and drains away over the course of a few days. A lake that exists for several years, then disappears in a few days, then forms again. Nature here operates on its own timescales. The mountains hold water. It flows downward and creates, where no one expects it, something impossible. The Charan Canyon in southeastern Kazakhstan is sometimes called the younger brother of the Grand Canyon, a comparison unfair in both directions. Charan does not try to be the Grand Canyon, it is simply different. The Charan River has cut through layers of red and orange sandstone over several million years, and the result? Walls up to trest meters high with forms sculpted by wind and water into utterly unexpected shapes. The canyon stretches defino kilometers. In its depths, sheltered from wind and frost, lives a relic ash tree, a tree that survived the last ice age by taking refuge right here. Outside was a frozen desert. Inside the canyon, a microclimate, a refuge, survival. The Mural, the Kazakh subspecies of the red deer, inhabits the Tianshan and the Zungarian Altai, large with enormous antlers. In October, males roar in mountain valleys, and the sound echoes through the gorges such that the mountain itself seems to be crying out. The roar of the Mural is one of the most powerful natural sounds of the temperate zone, deep, guttural, seeming to come from inside the rock itself. When you hear it for the first time, it is not immediately clear that it comes from an animal. The spring floods of the Ili River, which flows from China through Kazakhstan into Lake Balkhash, create flooded Tugay forests, thickets of poplar, Russian olive, tamarisk, and elm right at the water's edge. This is a special type of forest that exists only along major rivers in arid zones, where desert begins just a few kilometers from the bank. Tugay forests are a green strip of life amid dry space. Pheasants, little owls, and kingfishers nest in them. Wild boar and roe deer take shelter in them. In Kazakhstan, Tugay forests have survived precisely because the desert prevents agriculture from reaching the banks of these rivers. Lake Balkhash is one of the strangest bodies of water on the planet. It is divided into two parts connected by a narrow strait, and the western half is fresh water, while the eastern half is saline. This is not a metaphor or a simplification. It is literal chemistry, two different types of water in a single lake. The western part receives fresh water from the Ili River. The eastern part is closed. Evaporation there exceeds inflow, and salt concentrates. The strait between them is too narrow and shallow for the waters to mix, and on satellite imagery the boundary is visible as a change in the color of the water. Balkhash is the only large lake in the world with such a sharp internal chemical boundary. But there is a lake that nearly vanished entirely, and the story of its disappearance is about what humans are capable of doing to nature in just a few decades. The Aral Sea, possibly the most famous environmental catastrophe of the 20th century, lies on the territory of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. In an UDNI 2000 set, it was the fourth largest lake in the world. By the 2000, it had shrunk to roughly 10% of its original volume. The water was diverted for irrigation of cotton fields. The Amu Darya and Sir Darya rivers, which fed the sea, became so depleted that in dry years they did not reach the Aral at all. The sea retreated. In its place, salt, dust, and the rusting hulls of fishing vessels stranded in the desert, dozens of kilometers from the water. This is an image that explains a great deal about what humans know how to do to nature. But there is a continuation of this story that far fewer people know. The Kazakh portion of the Aral, the North Aral Sea, was separated from the southern part by a dam in 22-second pad. The waters of the Sir Darya were directed here, and the lake began to recover. Slowly, not fully, but the water returned. Fish returned. Reed beds returned. Ducks nest on the shores again. This is not a victory or a happy ending. Too much has been lost beyond recovery. But it is testimony that nature, if given water and time, finds a way to come back. The Mangyshlak Peninsula on the Caspian coast looks like the surface of Mars. Chalk cliffs, salt plateaus, deep gorges cut through red and white rock. Almost total absence of vegetation across large areas. Here lies the Kurgalzhyn Depression, one of the deepest depressions in the world, 132 meters below sea level. This is not a chasm or a canyon, but a vast, flat basin you can walk down into on foot. In summer, temperatures reach 50 degrees, and a silence broken only by the wind settles over it. But Mangyshlak is not dead. In its mountains and canyons lives the Ustyurt argali, a mountain sheep that has adapted to life not in high snowy peaks, but on plateaus and rocky desert terrain. It is a rare, poorly studied species. Here, too, is the goitered gazelle, a small gazelle with large eyes and slender legs that runs across stony desert so lightly it seems weightless. The gazelle gets water from the plants it eats and can go without drinking for weeks, an adaptation the desert has been developing for millions of years. The Ustyurt Plateau, a vast, flat surface between the Caspian and the Aral Sea, is another Kazakh version of another planet. An almost treeless expanse, cut at its edges by vertical escarpments, chinks, up to 300 meters high. You stand at the edge of a chink, and below you is a vertical wall, and then the plain runs to the horizon. This is the boundary between the plateau and the Kizilkum Desert below. You do not cross it gradually, you step across it in a single stride off the edge. Saiga antelopes winter on the Ustyurt. Tens of thousands of animals come here from the northern steppes. In winter it is cold and windy, but not as much as on the open steppe. The chinks provide shelter from the wind, snow accumulates beneath them, and the saiga can paw through it in search of grass. Steppe eagles and golden eagles circle over the plateau, looking for the weak or ill. Work these birds have been performing here for thousands of years. Betpak Dala, the hungry steppe, a vast plateau in central Kazakhstan, covering around 0 square kilometers, is neither a typical steppe nor a typical desert. In summer, it reaches plus 45, and there is almost no water. In winter, it drops to minus 35 with a piercing wind. It seems impossible to live there. But Betpak Dala is the main birthing ground for saiga antelopes in spring. Thousands of females come here precisely to give birth. Open terrain with good visibility, nowhere for a predator to hide, a long line of sight in every direction. The fawns are born into this harshness precisely because this is the safest place of all. The Caspian Sea off the coast of Kazakhstan is the largest landlocked sea in the world, and its Kazakh coastline, some 10 kilometers long, remains one of the wildest. The Caspian seal, the only seal species in this sea, gives birth to its pups on the ice of the northern Caspian in winter. They are small, spotted with large, dark eyes. In warm winters, when the ice does not form, there is nowhere for them to give birth. The Caspian seal population has fallen tenfold over the past 100 years, a story about how climate warming and fishing together do what neither cause would have managed alone. The beluga sturgeon survived the dinosaurs and several ice ages. A fish that can weigh 100 kilograms and live 100 years, the very one that yields the most expensive caviar in the world. It used to ascend rivers to spawn, until dams blocked most of the spawning rivers. Today, the beluga in the Caspian faces serious risk of extinction. It did not survive a few decades of poaching and dam construction in the 20th century. This is a story that nature tells again and again, about how many millions of years it takes to create a species, and how few it takes to destroy one. Caspian seals gather in spring on the shallows of the northern Caspian, thousands of them at a time. They bask in the sun, play in the water, catch kilka and atharina, small fish abundant in the Caspian. Caspian kilka is truly numerous, billions of individuals, and it feeds seals, fish-eating birds, and larger fish. Kilka is the foundation of the food pyramid in this enclosed sea. When at the beginning of the 2006, kilka sharply declined due to the introduction of the comb jellyfish Nemiopsis, the same one that had wreaked havoc in the Black Sea, the entire Caspian ecosystem responded. Seals grew thin, bird numbers dropped, fish became scarce. One invasive species changed an entire sea. In the south of the country, the desert appears lifeless. But look carefully, and there is a quiet, inconspicuous life of its own. The flora of the Kazakh deserts is a world apart, one that most people miss because they look right over it. The saxaul, a leafless tree with green branches that perform the function of leaves, is the main inhabitant of the Kurgalzhyn Desert in southern Kazakhstan. Its roots reach down up to 10 meters in search of water, and its wood is so hard and dense that it sinks in water, unlike most trees. Saxaul thickets provide shade and shelter for foxes, hares, monitor lizards, and many birds. Without the saxaul, the desert would be even emptier. The Kurgalzhyn Desert in southern Kazakhstan, the Red Sands, is not what most people imagine. There are no endless flat dunes. There are low hills fixed in place by vegetation. There are takir, flat clay surfaces that after rain are covered by a thin crust of algae and look like ancient ceramics. There are salt flats where only halophytes grow. There are places where saxaul forms something resembling a real forest, and everywhere, signs of life that are not immediately obvious. The gray monitor, the largest lizard in Central Asia, up to 1.5 meters long, hunts here on other lizards, rodents, and nestlings. In summer, it is active in the morning and evening, sheltering in a burrow during the heat. When it runs, it rises up on its hind legs and covers ground at a speed you would not expect from a lizard. The Karatau Mountains in southern Kazakhstan, an isolated ridge in the middle of the plain, contain endemic species found nowhere else in the world. It is a modest ridge, but isolated enough that over millions of years, it has produced several dozen plant species unique to Karatau. A small island of evolution in the middle of steppe and desert, it is protected, not sufficiently, but protected. The Tianshan in spring is the movement of the snow line. The snow retreats up the slopes at roughly 100 meters of altitude every few days, and life follows behind it. First, the wild apple and apricot trees bloom in the lower valleys, then the meadow grasses at mid-elevation, then the alpine primroses near the snow line. The wild apple and apricot trees in the Tianshan Mountains are the ancestors of all cultivated apples and apricots in the world, not metaphorically, but literally. Central Asia, including the Kazakh Tianshan, is the center of origin for these cultivated plants. The wild trees growing here in the gorges are what humans thousands of years ago developed into the apple sitting on your table. The Zungarian Alatau, a mountain range on the border of Kazakhstan and China, one of the least studied in the region. Its forests of Tianshan spruce are dense, dark, with a thick understory of barberry and rosehip. In these forests, snow leopard, brown bear, Eurasian lynx, roe deer, wild boar at a stream, golden eagle over an alpine meadow. This is not a list, but a single place, a single ecosystem where all of it exists simultaneously and in balance. Balance built up over millions of years, which humans can disrupt in just a few decades, or preserve if they choose. The golden eagle in Kazakhstan is a bird of special standing, not just a predator, but a cultural symbol, present on the country's coat of arms. Berkuchi, hunting with golden eagles, is a tradition of several thousand years, and in Kazakhstan, it is still alive. But the wild golden eagle is something else. It hunts alone across a vast territory of several hundred square kilometers, taking hares, marmots, foxes, and sometimes young roe deer. The speed of its dive, up to 20 kilometers per hour. The impact of its talons, around parallel kilograms of pressure. That means prey dies from the impact before the eagle has time to close its grip. The rivers of Kazakhstan, the Irtysh, the Ili, the Sirdarya, the Ural, are arteries along which a significant share of life is concentrated. In a desert and semi-desert landscape, a river is life in the most literal sense. The Irtysh flows from China, crosses Kazakhstan, and enters Russia, one of the great rivers of Asia. Along its banks stretches a floodplain forest, poplars, willows, aspens in a narrow green strip amid the steppe. This forest is home to Eurasian beaver, otter, and vast numbers of birds. The river landscape of the Irtysh in May, when the floodplain is submerged and the poplars stand waist-deep in water, is one of the most beautiful in Kazakhstan. The Ural is the river that divides Kazakhstan and Russia, and which historically was one of the finest fishing waters in the world. Beluga sturgeon, and sterlet used to ascend it to spawn. Today, there are incomparably fewer, but they are there. The river has not died. In its delta, in the northern Caspian, beluga can still be seen, not in the numbers of 100 years ago, but enough to remember that it belongs here. There is a quality of the Kazakh landscape that is hard to capture in a photograph and nearly impossible to put into words. It is the horizon. In the central Kazakh steppe, the earth is so flat and so open that visibility extends 70 to 80 kilometers in every direction. The sky fills 3/4 of the field of vision. Clouds cast shadows the size of a small city. A storm approaching you is visible an hour before it arrives. This openness is not emptiness. It is a special quality of space that changes something inside a person who has stood within it. You understand your own scale, and rather than feeling oppressed, you feel free. The Kazakh steppe in summer is a different place from the spring one. The tulips are gone. The green has burned to gold. Feathergrass, silvery, long, stands everywhere and moves in the wind in waves like water. Watching feathergrass steppe on a windy day is watching a living sea that does not roar, but whispers. This whisper is one of the most calming sounds that exists. Nothing cuts through it, only sometimes the cry of a steppe eagle high overhead or the distant whistle of a ground squirrel. The russet ground squirrel in the Kazakh steppe is one of its most important and most underappreciated inhabitants. It digs burrows that loosen the soil and improve its structure. It eats grass and thereby prevents the accumulation of dry biomass that fuels steppe fires. Its burrow is home to others: shrews, beetles, spiders, sometimes small birds. When the russet ground squirrel stands upright at its burrow, that is not simply a posture, it is a guard post. The first to spot a golden eagle or a fox whistles, and the entire colony vanishes underground within seconds. Ground squirrels live in colonies and alert one another. Collective security developed over millions of years of life in open terrain. The steppe polecat hunts ground squirrels, a specialized predator with specialized prey. It is so well adapted to life in burrows that it pursues the ground squirrel underground. Long body, short legs, the ability to turn around in a narrow space, a hunter built for subterranean pursuit. In summer, the ground squirrels are active, and the polecat is well fed. In winter, when ground squirrels are hibernating, it switches to voles. This flexibility allows it to survive where one species of prey is unavailable for half the year. When the steppe darkens, it comes alive differently. At night, there are entirely different rules here. The nocturnal steppe is a world apart, one almost no one ever sees. During the day, the steppe seems sparsely populated. At night, it comes alive. The long-eared hedgehog, with ears disproportionately large for its body, comes out to look for insects, lizards, and small rodents. Its ears matter more than its nose. It hears prey beneath the ground and beneath leaves. The Corsac fox, a small steppe fox, moves silently through the grass hunting voles. The marbled polecat, with its black and white patterned fur, one of the most beautiful predators in Eurasia, rare and nearly invisible, hunts rodents in burrows. You encounter it only by chance. It does not appear on purpose. The Siberian red deer in the mountain forests of eastern Kazakhstan in October is above all a sound. The roar of a male in a gorge carries for several kilometers and fills all the space around. In the mountains, it echoes off the slopes and arrives from several directions at once, making it impossible to tell where it is coming from. Males converge, displaying the size of their antlers and the power of their voice. If that is not enough, they fight with their antlers, and battles between large Siberian red deer are physically brutal. Both males afterward often stand breathing heavily, swaying. The winner leaves with the females. The loser leaves alone. The Altai Mountains of Kazakhstan in autumn. The Siberian larch turns yellow and stands golden on the slopes. Aspen turns red in the valleys. Above this gold and red, a blue sky of an intensity that only occurs at high altitude, in the dry continental air of late autumn. The first snow falls on the peaks in September, thin, almost invisible from below. By October, snow has descended 1,000 meters lower. By November, the mountains are entirely white. This movement of white down the slopes is one of the clearest natural calendars that exists. When the snow reaches a certain point, everyone living in the mountains knows it is time. The Siberian ibex in the mountains of the Tianshan and Altai can do something that brings a person close to physical discomfort. It walks along a cliff face where there are no visible footholds, only microscopic ledges. Its hooves, with a hard outer rim and a soft center, work like climbing crampons. It does not slip, it literally adheres to the rock. It climbs a vertical cliff faster than a person walks a horizontal trail. This is not an exaggeration, it is documented. For the Siberian ibex, a sheer wall is a refuge from the snow leopard, which jumps well but climbs vertical surfaces less effectively. Above the steppe, above the mountains, above the lakes, the sky is full of birds, especially in autumn, especially on routes from Siberia to India. The Tianshan spruce is an endemic of these mountains, a tree that in its natural state grows only here and nowhere else in the world. It can live up to 300 years and reach 40 meters in height. Its needles are blue-green, sharp, with a characteristic resinous scent. Its forests are dark even at noon. The crowns are dense, the lower branches begin low, and beneath them grow moss and fern. In this dark, resin-scented forest lives the roe deer, sometimes the wolf, regularly the Eurasian lynx. Lynx tracks in the snow in a spruce forest. Large, round, without claw marks, are one of the most beautiful signs of a winter mountain forest. Several of the world's largest bird migration routes pass through Kazakhstan, linking Siberia with South Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. In spring and autumn, the sky above the steppe is full of wings. Bean geese, white-fronted geese, and red-breasted geese travel in enormous flocks. Ducks of all species, waders that breed in the tundra and winter in India or Africa, stop here to feed and rest. The demoiselle crane, the smallest of the cranes, graceful and extraordinarily beautiful, nests in the Kazakh steppe. Its dances in the mating season, with bows, leaps, and bugling calls, are one of the most impressive natural spectacles of the steppe. Demoiselles form lifelong pairs and nest directly on the ground. No nest, just a small hollow, sometimes lined with pebbles. Eggs are laid in May, chicks hatch in June, and in autumn the family heads south to India, flying over the Himalayas at over 7 meters, one of the most grueling routes on the planet. The red-breasted goose is one of the most beautiful geese in the world, small, with a striking pattern of chestnut, black, and white. It winters on the Caspian and in Iran, nests on the Taimyr Peninsula in Russia, and stops in Kazakhstan on its journey. It can be seen on Kazakh water bodies in October and November, and in March and April. A compact flock amid white-fronted geese with which it associates. The chestnut patches are visible from a great distance. It stands out in any flock. Rare, beautiful, fleeting. 3 weeks in spring and 3 weeks in autumn, then gone. Steppe fires in Kazakhstan are part of a natural cycle that existed long before humans. Dry grass burns in May and September when wind and drought coincide. Fire moves at up to kilometers per hour in a strong wind. Visible for dozens of kilometers, a wall of smoke on the horizon that grows. After the fire, the ground is black, but within a week, the first green shoots appear, and within a month, the site of the fire is covered in young grass, more nutritious than the old. The steppe knows how to use fire. It is part of its biology. Saiga antelope, russet ground squirrel, great bustard, all of them know how to live with periodic fires. The problem is not fire, but when fire comes too frequently or too late. Winter in the Kazakh steppe is a trial that here is called zut. Zut is when a thaw is followed by frost, and the snow is sealed under a layer of ice. Beneath the ice, the grass is there, but it cannot be reached. The saiga antelope's hooves cannot break through. In a severe zut, thousands and tens of thousands of animals die, not from cold, but from hunger. After a zut, dark patches remain on the snow, herds that lay down and did not rise. This is brutal, and it is part of how the steppe regulates the numbers of its inhabitants. Every few years, a cull. Those who survive are the ones who can keep moving in search of places where there is no ice, or where it is thinner. And all of this, the steppe, the mountains, the lakes, the animals, exists now at a point of choice. The threats are real, but so is the possibility of preservation. Kazakhstan today is a country where nature stands at a turning point. On one side, vast territories barely touched by human activity, preserving their biological wealth precisely because no one has yet reached them. On the other, pressure is growing from all directions. Oil extraction in the Caspian, irrigation drawing water from rivers, poaching, climate change making zuts more frequent and droughts longer. But here, 1 million saiga antelopes still live. That in itself is almost unbelievable, given what happened in the $10,000. Here flamingos nest at Kurgalzhyn. Here the snow leopard hunts in the mountains. Here the red-breasted goose flies through every autumn. Here feathergrass moves in the wind, as it has since the steppe first appeared. Kazakhstan is a place where nature has not yet lost, where balance is still possible, where what seems lost sometimes returns if given a chance. The Aral Sea will not come back fully, that is true, but the North Aral Sea came back, the reeds came back, the fish came back, the birds came back. This is not a small victory. It is proof that nature does not give up as long as it is given even a little water and even a little time. The steppe at dawn in May is a moment difficult to explain to someone who has not been there. The sun has not yet risen. The sky is pink and green at the same time. Tulips stand in the morning dew. The russet ground squirrel is the first to emerge from its burrow, standing upright, looking around. The steppe eagle slowly gains altitude on the first morning thermals. Somewhere in the grass a quail calls, and high above the steppe a wedge of demoiselle cranes is already drawing its line, the final chord of a departing summer. Quiet. A horizon 70 kilometers in every direction, and between you and that horizon, only this. A dam was built to separate the Aral, to save at least part of the sea. Would you have done the same?